Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Bold Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. I am here with Michael Smeltzer from the Wolverine Chronicle, here to talk all about things Michigan and the Chargers, as that's developed over the last month. He also hosts the Big House Bleachers podcast on the Block M Podcast Network, talking all things Michigan football. So, Michael, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. And like you already alluded to, Michigan news is Chargers news all of a sudden. So we've got plenty of guys to talk about that cross over between both of our news cycles. So I'm excited to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, let's start with, I guess, the big fish first. Jim Harbaugh, who obviously decides to become Chargers head coach after winning the national championship. What was your feeling on that the whole way through? Because we sort of, followed the cycle of rumors of, how competitive was Michigan, how competitive was the Chargers, how competitive was Atlanta, right? All of these, teams who were supposedly competing for Jim Harbaugh. What was that? What was covering that like for you? And what was your, real indication and, thought process as to what Jim Harbaugh was thinking throughout?
Yeah, well, we've seen Harbaugh do this a number of times, right? The last few cycles, we saw Harbaugh to the NFL rumors. They never really got to this extent. Other than last season with Minnesota, there were some very real possibilities. This season, it looked like Michigan had a chance to keep him around. They were going to try to make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten, maybe even the highest paid coach in the country. Those of us that follow Michigan closely and the Michigan fan base know that athletic director Ward Manuel is not the most popular man in town, because many of us believe that he made it a little bit more difficult for Jim Harbaugh to stick around than we would have liked to have seen. And so Harbaugh has said in the past, the Lombardi Trophy is on his agenda. It's like on his bucket list. And so there may have been no keeping him in college permanently. And we saw him get very close when he came up as the Super Bowl runner-up with John Harbaugh winning the Super Bowl a few years back, several years back. And then, as you mentioned, it was between Atlanta and the Chargers. Allegedly, maybe there were some other people in the mix, but Atlanta never seemed like a real possibility to me, because
Yeah.
if Harbaugh wants to, win a Super Bowl, Atlanta just didn't have the pieces of the puzzle. Now, luckily for you, a guy that covers the Chargers actually do have several pieces to the puzzle. And so, you start with the quarterback position, and then you talk about being in the state of California, which is very appealing to Harbaugh. He's coached, I want to say, 3 different teams in the state of California before going back to LA to coach the Chargers. And so there's a lot of pieces of the play. I mean, he played for the Chargers, right? He's very good relationship with the ownership. And so to me, I was always nervous that the Chargers would be the one to steal him. And sure enough, you guys are the ones that got him.
Yeah, no, it was crazy to follow throughout. When it first started, I was like, is he really going to leave college? He's done this before. And then, it started to really feel real, when he took a second meeting, and I'm like, okay, maybe, maybe there is something here. And obviously quickly materialized after that. Following up on that, you mentioned Ward Manuel. How strong was Michigan's, desire to keep Harbaugh, in your opinion? And I say this because of the NCAA violations, obviously, and they had the Sharon Moore succession plan kind of in place here, for a little bit, following the games that the Ohio State game he coached when Jim was suspended and stuff like that. So do you think Michigan pushed really hard for it, or, in terms of letting Harbaugh walk to the pros, they just kind of go, it is what it is, right? In terms of kind of letting things fall where they may.
Yeah, well, President Santa Ono at Michigan has been very vocal about supporting Harbaugh, wanting to keep Harbaugh around. The fans, the players, the coaches, everybody wanted to keep Harbaugh around. I mean, he literally just won a national championship.
Right.
You can't ask for more.
Not common for those guys to leave.
Yeah, but there has always been an undercurrent of tension between him and the athletic director, Ward Manuel. And so there's always going to be those questions. What did happen behind closed doors? There was a little bit of a smoke and mirrors show. Like after it seemed like the Chargers had already wrapped everything up with Harbaugh and it was basically a done deal. Then Michigan came out with this statement like, "Oh, we're offering him A, B, and C to stick around." And it almost felt like, okay, that was too little, too late. Like if you were going to offer him that, you should have done that 2 weeks ago before the Chargers courted him and all that. But nevertheless, you mentioned the secession plan. Sharon Moore is the head football coach at Michigan. Now, he doesn't happen to have as many assistant coaches as we thought he would originally, and we have Jim Harbaugh to blame for that. But it's comes with the territory, right? Coaches always take a lot of their guys with them.
Yeah, I think that this, in particular, we'll talk about those guys, and I guess we can get to that now. You have Mike Elston and Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscale, Dylan Roney, Ben Herbert, this whole list of guys that Harbaugh's now bringing with him to the Chargers. Is there more to follow? It doesn't seem like it, but that's the list of guys for now. What are the Chargers getting? I guess you could start with Jim Harbaugh, at the top of the food chain first. But what are they getting kind of with that whole Michigan program, if there's anything you want to mention about any of those guys in particular?
Yeah, I think so. We'll start with Jim Harbaugh. I think people forget oftentimes that being a football coach at that level, right? A Power Five college team or an NFL team, it's more like being a CEO than it is like being a position coach out on the field, And so Harbaugh knows how to run a program. And so that's what you guys are getting from him. He knows how to efficiently run a program. He knows how to get the most out of his guys. He knows how to, make in-game decisions that put his teams in the best position to win. He knows how to control a game. He knows how to minimize errors. And so those are the types of things. And I mean, I've watched plenty of Chargers games. Like those are the things that you would love to see more of, right? And so with him, you know what? If I were a betting man, which I am, I would bet that the Chargers will find themselves in the Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years. That's how confident I am that this is a good hire. So that's what you're getting with the main guy. I'll move on to the next two biggest hits that Michigan fans and players alike were upset about. First, Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter is a genius. I mean, he is, a carbon copy of Mike McDonald, who was our defensive coordinator 3 years ago. Then he went to the Baltimore Ravens under Jim Harbaugh's brother and was the defensive coordinator there. And then he just accepted the head coaching position for the Seattle Seahawks. Well, Jesse Minter the similarities are endless between Minter and Mike McDonald. And so I think Minter will be a head coach in the NFL in a couple of years. And so enjoy him while you have him. The other guy that's an X factor is Ben Herbert, strength and conditioning coach. And there were questions about, do they need a guy like him at the pro level? Everybody thought he was going to stay at Michigan. He takes these 3-star recruits at Michigan and turns them into 5-star NFL talent. And so out of all the guys that you're getting, Ben Herbert is just a savage. And if he's able to get a tenth out of these pros as he was able to get out of these college players at Michigan, he's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, and I'll also say for Ben Herbert, like the thing that the Chargers have been continuously plagued by is injuries all the time, and that's been the story of the last couple of years. So even if these guys don't necessarily need like a trainer who's going to change their diets or something like that, as they have a lot of like staffs around them. Personally, I do think having him to even kind of lead things in a director of sports performance like type of way, and like fight for, even as Harbaugh said in his press conference, trying to fix up the new facility and things like that, and just doing the things you need to do to be like a high-end program. I think that's super important. And like you said, I've been super impressed by Jesse Minter too. I think they may only have him for a year. I frankly wouldn't be surprised if next year we're talking about him as one of the head coaching candidates. And you mentioned Mike McDonald getting hired. It seems like, this cycle we talked a lot about, the hotshot offensive guys getting hired like a Ben Johnson, and it seemed like this cycle kind of, with Mike McDonald's hiring and the hiring of a couple other people, it seemed like it did kind of skew defense more so with this hiring cycle. So I kind of wouldn't be surprised if Jesse Minter, given that he plays a very similar scheme to McDonald. I'll be curious to see how he adjusted for the pros. I posted a video on my Twitter a little bit ago where he actually, this was like a month ago, where he was talking about the differences between NFL, offenses and college offenses, and then how you're reacting to that based on being the defense. So I think he's, an incredibly bright guy with the scheme that he brings. And, mentioning Steve Klingscale and Mike Elston for a bit. And this is where I'll kind of throw things back to you with a lot of the Michigan guys who are in this draft that could become Chargers now. I just looked at odds today and I see his face in the background over there, but Blake Corum was like plus 150 for next team odds to become a Charger over on DraftKings today. But I did, I am interested in some of those defensive guys, coming over here. Chris Jenkins obviously is like kind of a second, third round fit, potentially with Mike Elston. And then my personal favorite player of the draft for Michigan would be Mike Sanderstill. I loved him.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah, I love him playing all the time. Devastated because I am a Rutgers fan, and he just absolutely housed the pick six against us in September, October, and I was like, man, this guy, he's fun to watch, and I kept watching him throughout the rest of the year. So, who are some of the guys bridging off of that you think are kind of Michigan fits that can join Harbaugh's system in the NFL here?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I was thinking about that before the show tonight because I follow football and I know the Chargers pretty well, but I was thinking about, what players from Michigan would make sense to go over there. Now, obviously in the later rounds, it's kind of a coin flip. It's anybody's game. Like, you don't really know. But when you start talking about rounds 2, 3, and 4, I was looking at it, and I mean, Blake Corum kind of fits the bill for that, going to the Chargers. I could definitely see that. And then you hit the nail on the head with Mike Sanderstill. And I still, for the life of me, can't figure out why he's being mocked as low as he is, because if I'm an NFL team and I've got the 32nd pick in the draft, like, so the last pick of the first round, and I'm sitting there and Mike Sanderstill is available, I'm taking him because, I mean, he might be a little bit undersized, but he has proven time and time again that he is a ball player and a playmaker. And so if you guys can get Mikey Sanderstill on your team, that would be a huge, huge win. I don't think Roman Wilson makes as much sense, but he's another guy that's been the wide receiver at Michigan. He's been creeping up the draft boards. I don't know. How are you guys at offensive line right now? How are the Chargers looking on the O-line? They need some help?
Yeah, particularly the center position, because Corey Linsley unfortunately got injured last year, had a heart issue, so he's unfortunately been forced to medically retire. But I do expect that because this is a Harbaugh team, even though they don't have like a need at tackle, I have seen tackle mocked a lot to them at 5. You had trade back scenarios in the first round as well. And not only is this a Harbaugh team, but it's also a Greg Roman team now, for better or for worse, at offensive coordinator. And he has built his names on having like this strong run game, much like Jim Harbaugh has. So I kind of wouldn't be surprised if like they addressed offensive line fairly early within like those first 3 rounds, and then figure out what to do at center and free agency or the draft as well. I know Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon is another guy that has been like a dream for Chargers fans after his Senior Bowl performance and what he's done this year. I see Drake Nugent as a guy in the draft a lot, who kind of gets mocked if you want like a 4th or 5th round center maybe. But yeah, Zach Zinter is another guy who I know is on that offensive line, who I know is hoping to come back from that injury. He got in the Ohio State game. So, I like both of them as prospects on the interior line, but I do expect, whether they come from Michigan or not, I do expect the Chargers to kind of build out this offensive line a little bit. And those Roman offenses have always been like, we'll kind of get the interior going of our offense first and then build outwards from there. So yeah, I'll be curious to kind of see what they do in the draft. Roman Wilson is interesting because I sort of think he's like, even though he doesn't totally fit what the Chargers have now, because I think him and Keenan Allen is like a little bit redundant. If they wanted to draft him to be like the Keenan Allen replacement, so to speak, I think you could like talk yourself into that if they wanted to move off of him, but I don't sense that they do. So I do think that you probably want a more like dynamic playmaker. I know Brock Bowers or Malik Neighbors or guys that have been mocked to them in the first round as well. So none of those options would like particularly surprise me. You mentioned, the Super Bowl aspirations potentially in these first, 2 or 3 years with the Chargers, and Chargers fans are going through it right now because we had to watch Mahomes win another Super Bowl. Great, never great to watch another division rival win. Maybe it's the same feeling Michigan fans had during all those Ohio State years early on in Jim Harbaugh's tenure. But I guess, what about Jim Harbaugh gives you, the faith that he can accelerate this, program build, particularly going back to the pros after he has been, in college for some time?
Well, I mean, he's done it everywhere he's been. I mean, a couple of his stops, I guess you could say, have taken a little bit longer than immediate, but he's shown improvements every year. And that's the thing, is the Chargers are not like bottom of the league status right now, right? Like the Chargers are in this perpetual kind of like I don't know. I don't have your records in front of me, but like kind of like a slightly better than 500 team, but never quite over the hump, every year. And so I think Harbaugh is a perfect guy to take that and move it to the next level. I mean, his record shows that he's done it. And really it's what I kind of led with Harbaugh, which is he knows how to minimize errors. He knows how to control a game. And those are the things that take a team that's always close to a team that goes on win streaks. And you minimize turnovers, you control the game. A typical Harbaugh move is to get the ball back with a 3-point lead and with 8 minutes left, and to never give it back to the other team, right? To have one of those 6, 7, 8 minute long drives that just sucks the life out of the opponent. And speaking of that, he likes to lean on his like tight ends in those kind of positions. And so I wanted to come back to the draft here. I would be shocked if the Chargers don't take Brock Bowers at number 5. I think that, I mean, I think every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's got to be who Harbaugh's going for. But then there is another guy from Michigan that the Chargers could look at the end of the draft, late round, because Harbaugh loves his tight ends, and I would not be surprised if he spent 2 draft picks on tight ends because of the way he builds his teams. AJ Barner, who is an amazing blocker, really good pass catcher, one of the highest PFF graded players on Michigan's roster throughout the season. AJ Barner is a name that, you guys might not know because he's not top of the draft boards or anything, but he's a really good player that I think Harbaugh is kind of keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to address tight end. Right now, the Chargers don't have many tight ends that are contract. I think we just have Donald Parham, and that's pretty much it. So they'll have to attack free agency and draft. And like I said, with Roman and Harbaugh, they've always been kind of a trench team, particularly in San Francisco when you have Vernon Davis, right? And then obviously Michigan. Someone, I believe on Chargers Twitter, did find the picture of Bowers when he was initially recruited by Michigan, and standing next to Harbaugh before Georgia, poached him. So I know that's got a lot of play from Chargers fans. I think it makes a lot of conventional sense to take Bowers. I am curious to see how Joe Ortiz, who comes from Baltimore, as the GM here, kind of, values, tight ends. Baltimore particularly had been a very like they take a defensive playmaker in the first round, or they take a quarterback, or they take a wide receiver. So I am curious to see how that Harbaugh ideology of like, building the trench team kind of meshes with Joe Ortiz as the new GM to, kind of get the best draft value out of every single pick. And, he's kind of stressed that in his early press conference. So I think that'll be interesting to watch. Are there any other guys, either from Michigan or Harbaugh's background that you kind of, could see coming with Harbaugh to the Chargers here?
Yeah, I don't know. We've mentioned quite a few names of guys that are good, that are compatible. I mean, the offensive line is one of the most obvious places to go. You did mention Zach Zinter. He had that gruesome leg break, but I just don't think that's the type of injury that's going to hold him down very long.
Right.
Sometimes those clean breaks are actually easier to heal than like a ligament or a tendon. And so Zach Zinter's basically going to be the steal of the draft because he would have been a first round pick easily without the injury. And so with the injury, somebody's going to snag him a little later. And they're going to get a generational guard, one of those guys that we see that's a Pro Bowl caliber guy in the trenches. And so that's a guy to keep an eye on. I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm having trouble thinking. We got several other guys in the draft. You mentioned Chris Jenkins. Chris Jenkins is, for some reason, I just don't see Chris Jenkins going to the Chargers though. I don't know why. It's just like just a feeling.
Yeah, I also, a guy that I like that I think has gone under the radar. I like Jalen Harrell a lot, who is,
Yeah.
in this draft, if they want kind of a late round edge guy, because they might be investing more in like the tight ends and, the offensive line in those first few rounds of the draft, if they do go with the Bowers. And then if you need a pass rusher, depending on what they decide to do with Joey Bosa and some of these guys with high cap hits, I kind of wouldn't mind taking a chance kind of with his athletic profile and what he's been able to show at Michigan as well. I'll get you out on this first year record prediction for Jim Harbaugh in the pros here.
Man, I believe in Jim Harbaugh. And not only do I believe in him, I think he's just on a run right now. I think he's got all the juices flowing. Things are good. He's bringing in the right guys. Who's the offensive coordinator going to be? Is Kellen Moore sticking around? Who does do you guys have an OC yet?
It's going to be Greg Roman from the.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from the 49ers days, from Stanford. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. I'm going to say I could see a 12-win team. I could genuinely see a 12-win team. And then, in the play, you go 12 wins, anything can happen in the playoffs. You know what I mean? I could see them being one of those teams that can find themselves in an AFC championship. And I think the kicker is Justin Herbert ready to step up, because we saw what a guy like Patrick Mahomes can do. He can take a team that might not be the best team in the league and win a Super Bowl, because when there's a minute left and you need a score, Mahomes is going to do it any way that he can. And so can Justin Herbert become that type of player? And if he can, sky is the limit. You guys might be holding up a Lombardi trophy before it's all said and done.
Yeah, I hope that's how this ends. Certainly, they're paying him like someone who's going to bring home the Lombardi. So I have all the faith in the world so far in what Jim Harbaugh has done so far. Again, you guys can check out the Big House Bleachers podcast on the Block M Podcast Network. I wish you, Michael, all the best for Michigan football going forward with Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale and all the people who are going to build the program there. I do not wish you well. Actually, no, Rutgers doesn't play Michigan next year. Rutgers is my team in the Big Ten. So I keep forgetting the new schedule where I like look
Yeah,
at
it's
the
crazy.
Big Ten. I look at the Big Ten schedule. I'm like, why are we playing USC? Why are we playing UCLA in Washington? And I'm like, oh yeah, we don't
Uh-huh.
even play Michigan or Ohio State next year. It's such a weird conference. But I wish Michigan all the best next season. Thank you guys for Jim Harbaugh, and thanks for coming on and talk ball with me.
Just don't steal any more coaches from us, okay? You guys just you got it, like half our team or half our staff. Just stop stealing guys. But Alex, thank you so much for having me on. I love what I see so far from the podcast. And if you ever need to catch up for any other reason, just give me a call and I'd be happy to come.
All right. Thanks for coming on, guys. And as always, bolt up.